the gravity of the situation here. The Commission's approved a recovery plan. The problem is that acceptable plan was based on circumstances that existed 6-8 months ago, and the bottom's fallen out of the bucket. We've had additional issues arise, and the plan is no longer viable. Nita kind of gave you the snapshot of the current financial situation, and it's good that some of those one-time monies came in, but as the chair noted, largely those were planned for. And the city remains in structural deficit. I've written a letter to you. I sent it out Friday, and kind of explains in writing some of the things that changed. You know it probably as well as anybody does. I won't reiterate that, but the bottom line is that East Cleveland is insolvent. And that leads us to the question of borrowing. The financial plan considers borrowing for two purposes, both of which are permissible under the statute. The first being that to eliminate our outstanding accounts payable, and that's a good idea. And the second is to eliminate the fund deficits, which is also a good idea. However, it's not a good idea if the conditions that led to those deficits have not been cured, because what that means is we'll pay off one set of deficits with debt, and then we turn around and we get a whole new batch of deficits. That's what the structural deficit means. And until the city can get to the point where it doesn't have that structural deficit, I can't really suggest to you that it's a good idea to go forward with any borrowing. And would go on record today as saying that as the situation is today, I think it's unwise to go forward with the authorization of the local government fund notes. Now, that being said, we have to look forward to what happens next. And you only have, I should say, not you, the commission, but the city itself only has so many limited options available. I'm disappointed that Mayor Norton wasn't able to be with us today, because on his shoulders and President, on your shoulders, really lies the horrid responsibility of making the decisions among these awful options. We have to either find a way for new revenue, and quite frankly, as I look at your tax base and I look at your options, I have no idea where that would come from, but technically, if you could find more revenue, that would perhaps give you a route. Further cuts, and I have to say that, here I will give kudos to council and kudos to the mayor. Wow, you guys have made some very tough choices. I know you've made cuts that you never wanted to and felt compelled to do, and yet those cuts are insufficient to get the balance back in the budget. Chief, I know that the fire department has suffered casualties, and there comes a point where you really have to ask yourself, where's the safety? So another option is to seek, third or fourth, is to seek reorganization of your existing obligations. And you can do that either through the formal legal process or informally. But that requires some leadership. Technically, you can get all of your creditors, all the unions, all the places that you owe money to agree to not only reduce their what you owe them, to take a haircut in parlance, but also to look at that have tried to do that voluntarily to a receiver have ended up in court anyway. But the third option is to try to develop a plan where you can reduce your payables and the basis of your costs going forward. Frankly, I've looked at the numbers and knowing what the environment is for the competition for labor, I don't know that you have much room to be able to drive down your costs a whole lot that way. But technically, like revenue enhancement, it's a possibility. And then the final option is to look for a partner for merger. Greater economies of scale can create a path forward where together where you're unable to create a path forward alone. Let me hasten to say that I don't have an opinion about what you ought to do. I don't have a plan for what you ought to do. It's inappropriate for me to do that. The way Ohio law is written, and appropriately so, it is the role of the community to chart its own course. And my staff, and Eunice and Nita, have worked with you to try to help provide information and resources and ideas. And we will continue to do that. At the same time, the decisions really need to remain in your hands. You're the representatives of the people who are elected to make those decisions, not me or my staff. I will be glad to take questions and answer or hear comments to the chair's discretion as best as I can. But here's the bottom line from today's meeting, I think. East Cleveland's insolvent. The recovery plan is not going to get you to recovery, and we continue to have structural deficits. Madam Chair, I would ask that the Commission consider instructing the city to, as part of its budget process for 2015, which is ongoing right now, to develop a new recovery plan, and that the recovery plan and the budget match, and that whatever actions are necessary to eliminate the structural deficit need to happen. Here's the challenge. We pay payroll, okay? Your paychecks didn't bounce. But the problem is we're out of time. There's still a little bit of money in the bank, but not enough, not nearly enough. And so the day that it all comes down and there's no time left is the day that the city council president, the mayor gets a call, I get a call, there's no money for payroll. And you know what? I wouldn't blame hard-working people who work for the city if, with their paycheck bounce, if they didn't show up. Would any of us say that that was wrong, that they were wrong not to come back to work? None of us work for free, right? So when that day comes, what are we going to do? What options do we have at that point? There will be fewer options than the 4 awful options that I've outlined today. So I would be glad to engage in conversation. I want you to succeed. You are all part of the constituency of Ohio. I worry about your city. I worry about the people that work here. I worry about the conditions in this city. And I want to see you find a path forward. We must find a path forward. The budget and political problems that might exist don't mean that 18,000 people aren't still going to be living in this 4 square miles, right? And so the people are what we've got to be focused on, and we've just got to get past our pride, our hopes, our political futures, and figure out what we need to do.
Auditor Yost, I appreciate your comments. There are comments that has long been recognized if I'm correct, Anita will correct me, if I'm incorrect, Anita will correct me. We have had 3, financial recovery plans. And on the 3rd financial recovery plan, um, the first time that the council has worked hand in hand and due diligent with the auditor. We have kept in contact through telephone, by email, and we came up with a financial plan that we thought was viable. We discussed, put down all the things that was viable for us to make a change and go forward. And it was accepted by this commission and by the council in legislation to do that. First time we had a financial plan that we really thought that was successful. Then we turned around and was told that we could go forward with the borrow. And no one expects unexpected circumstances to come into play, but you should. And it did. So that leaves us still where we had to do a certificate of resource. We did that. Everything that we were told to do, the council was able to comply. There was a lot of overspending, and I can't say it didn't happen. There was spending that shouldn't have taken place in the past. There was hiring that should not have taken place in the past. There has been neglectful equipment that should not have taken place. There have been purchases that should not have taken place, but it did. So I'm not saying that I don't recognize the things that were improbable that entered into the equation. But what I am saying right now is that for the first time, this council and council president has reached out to the mayor to join with him in a town hall meeting to explain to our residents what is happening and how we go forward. I know what we have now. We're fledgling, teetering on the edge and might fall off. And I appreciate the fact that we do have such people as Anita Tish and Ms. Smith. But it's not enough. It's not enough. This city is still here and should remain here and not merger with any other city when we can bring about a change within ourselves. So what I am saying to you is that we will come, we have been advised that we need another recovery plan. We will work another recovery plan. There are things out there that can happen that we can bring in more revenue. There's no registration of any housing and businesses and things like that. That can bring in quite a bit revenue. There are other things that we have been working on, the council, that we have been working on that can bring in revenue. I am not one to say, oh, woe is me, because woe is not me, it's us. know that there has been quite an unnecessary, spending that shouldn't have taken place. Thank you.
All I can do is to tell you that we will remain engaged. We will be here for you. You know, I'm going to speak a little out of turn here because I'm not elected to the legislature and I'm not the governor. But I am an observer of those processes down in Columbus, and I can tell you, I don't see any, I don't see any new revenue coming out of Columbus in the way of like a rest package. I think that would be very unlikely.
So, all I'm saying is, we're on our own and we have to be creative. And when the creativity runs out, then we'll do it next, and we'll do the rest of the city.
I guess,
I can't speak for him, because he's not here. But I can only speak for the council, and this council has one very nice. And we're gonna continue. But like I do, because I am not only the council president, but I am the state central committee, and I work with down in North Florida. So I do know what it is, and I have been told what it is. But like I said, this city's got to be, should have been, but would have, could have, should have, is the wrong time back turn. Should have been more aggressive and more creative in things that we could have taken, but it wasn't. And like I said, now time is of the essence, and we must comply with the times and get a financial plan in place. That is viable. And I don't know how viable it's gonna be, but we're gonna work pretty hard to do that.
that's good news. And I'm not looking backward in the rearview mirror either. The dead past is just that, it's dead, and we can't change it. So we can only look forward. But looking forward, I want to be very clear, there isn't time left to try to find a bunch of new solutions. So you're in the budget process now. The first two of those four options are tied up in the budget. If you have any ideas about revenue enhancement, do it now. If you had any opportunity to reduce expenditures, you should do it during that budget process, because in 30 days, 40 days, when you finish that, whatever isn't covered at that point, you have to go to the next level and either look for reorganization of your financial obligations or look at merger, because that will at that point be all that's left. If you want to avoid looking at either of those two solutions, you must do it in this budget because time is of the essence.
Let me ask you another question. And this is Jeff's question, because many people are asking, are we here in the state of Ohio have the process of bankruptcy, like Detroit?
Is Ohio, or is there a process for the city?
The reason I'm asking that is because there doesn't seem to be a process, I won't say it wasn't a process in the state of Ohio, but there was in the state of Michigan which allowed Detroit to file bankruptcy.
Well, let me speak to that with a limited expertise. The area of the bankruptcy code that deals with municipalities is Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is not available unless the state provides a legal mechanism to access it. So Michigan obviously did have that trigger. Ohio has a statute to allow that. The one group of lawyers looks at that and says that that may only apply to municipalities that have bondholders. I personally disagree with that, and I think it would be a perverse reading of the law to say that, you know, well, you're not qualified, he's clear, because you don't have any bonds, but if you go out and borrow some bonds, then you can declare Chapter 9. That seems to me to be stupid. But, yeah. Anyway, The process, if it exists in Ohio, requires the Ohio Tax Commissioner to approve an application. However, before you can do that, under the bankruptcy code itself, and this is federal, so it's a national application, you have certain hoops that you have to jump through before you can even ask the judge to help you. And among those things is you have to have a meeting with all your creditors to try to work it out voluntarily first. So that was kind of the third option, to do that voluntarily. Whether you reorganize your debts with an agreement that's negotiated, or it happens under the force of law in court, the end result is the same. The idea would be everybody discounts the money that is owed and agrees to a lower cost basis going forward, so that you don't have this structural deficit. Now, all that, what does all that mean? I think that it means that it would be wise for the leadership of this study to convene a series of meetings with the creditors to try to develop that. If he succeeds, then he's done a good thing for the city. If he fails, he's at least met that prerequisite under the federal law. So that's a no-lose situation, it seems to me. Again, not my job to tell anyone what to do, but if you elected to go forward with that, that would be the next set of next steps.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the excellent explanation. I always do that, and it gives food for thought, and it gives me food for thought to a discussion with the mayor.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Any other questions?
May I be excused?
Go ahead. That's what we're here for. There's a question. Answer. May not be great answers, because that recovery plan has to be revised. So from a timing viewpoint, I would see us as getting both of those deliverables prior to the end of March when the permanent budget is due. And from the viewpoint of actual legally, I don't think that then gives the city the